Scriftlicious.
For this episode, instead of going over things to do in-game or tips to make you better, I wanted to talk about the mental aspect of PUBG. Not gonna sugarcoat this one, guys. PUBG is hard. Without a doubt, this is one of the most punishing games you will ever play outside of, say, the Dark Souls series. With that said, it's also one of the most rewarding games in that every game or firefight won feels like a real accomplishment. If I had to pick out one thing that Battle Royale games in general have going for them, it's how much they resemble gambling. I say that because both things provide experiences that offers players a high-risk, high-reward system that makes them both addicting to play when it's going well, but equally frustrating when it isn't. Another big thing I believe games and gambling share is something called tilt. Tilt refers to a state of mind in which a player is no longer making calm, logical decisions, but are instead making emotional decisions based on increases in frustration with the game they are playing, due usually to poor performance or poor outcome. As you can imagine, PUBG is a game that can cause players to become tilted very easily. This can be inherently difficult for a lot of players to overcome and, in a way, can artificially inflate the barrier of entry as it clouds the perception that the game is more difficult to succeed in and less enjoyable than it is, which of course creates a high potential for turning a lot of players off from ever even playing it again. I won't lie, I've had my moments of full tilted rage when I just Alt F4'd out of the game and gave up for that day. And to be honest, at that point, when things are going from bad to worse, walking away can quite possibly be the best thing that you can do for yourself in that moment. I say that because when it comes to getting better at something, it's important to understand and realize when you are no longer making any progress and need to take a break. If you don't and continue down a path where you're constantly just smashing your face against your keyboard hoping for things to get better, then you've discovered your point of diminishing returns. Now, this concept is usually reserved for things like economics, but can certainly be applied to all sorts of things, including video games. In the case of PUBG, the point of diminishing returns is reached when your growth and improvement have reached a plateau and in turn begin reaffirming or creating bad habits. The subsequent impact, however, is how negatively it affects your skills as a player because at this point, you're putting more effort into doing all the wrong things and committing them to muscle memory. Meaning, you're building your gameplay habits around things like taking bad fights or pushing enemies when it's less advantageous for you in those situations. Which, if you're already a struggling player, means you're dying more often than not and limiting your overall progress and enjoyment with the game. To put it more simply, when you put bad in, you get bad out. Speaking from my own experiences, I've had several instances where I would die over something frustrating, usually due in part to my own poor judgment, and proceed to rush back into another game, attempting to right the wrong from the previous match. While I've certainly taken the lessons from my previous deaths and used that knowledge to inform my next drop, there have been numerous times where I would completely ignore my better judgment and push buildings or chase shots because of my personal need to redeem myself in some way. This isn't to say that there aren't moments of success, but those moments are rather exceptions than the norm. When this happens, it's easy to fall into a negative feedback cycle where the poor choices create undesired outcomes that ultimately beget bad habits. With all the videos that I've done, I've tried to pick apart things in my gameplay or things I've watched other people do and wondered what might be the best way to do something or get better at something. I like being faced with a problem and figuring out efficient and creative ways of solving it. The idea was to see about developing ways in which players, myself included, could create good habits in their gameplay that would ultimately lead them to becoming a better player and finding more enjoyment in the game. Now, I certainly don't claim to have all the answers or be anywhere near as good as I want to be at this game, but for me, identifying weaknesses that I felt were common among the PUBG community was something I wanted to try and help with. But ultimately, I fall victim to the do as I say, not as I do when I get upset with the game and revert back to old habits from other games that get me killed way more than I win. I love PUBG. For all its flaws, it's one of the most mechanically depth tactical shooters on the market. But it took me a long time to realize that playing this game the way that I would play Call of Duty or Halo or Battlefield was wrong because those games don't punish you in the same way that PUBG does. In any of those games, you may go 4 or 5 deaths in a row before getting another kill, but you're given chances so quickly to do so that all those deaths really don't feel as meaningful. In PUBG, every death comes with anywhere from 60 seconds to a few minutes of downtime between each game. More so if you're someone who plays squads and duos and has to watch your teammates play out the rest of the game because you died early, which you might think would benefit a frustrated player and allow them an opportunity to cool off before the next match, but instead what I see happening is this growing impatience to get back into the game and to get kills, throwing away good habits and practice just to end up frustrated all over again. And that's where I want to end this video, reminding players that it's okay to lose and get frustrated, but try not to let it ruin your ability to improve. Don't let yourself get stuck in a rut that only constructs bad habits in your gameplay. Games are intended to be fun. I realize losing isn't fun, but sometimes that's just part of the process of getting better. Feeling like the game owes you something or you're being cheated out of kills doesn't really get you anywhere. Just like I've done with these videos, you have to be able to find what you suck at and figure out ways to fix it. And even then, you might still suck at the game, but hopefully you had fun doing so.